Alrighty, let's call our March 19th, 2024 Education Committee meeting to order. Let's do 1.02, Pledge to the Flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
1.03, may we have a roll call?
Elizabeth Dolberman.
Here.
Mary Lee Hall.
Here.
Samantha Hall. William Hall.
Here.
Jeremy Hash. Jennifer Hinkle.
Here.
Aiden Hinkle.
Here.
James Holly.
Here.
Elizabeth Wilson.
Here.
2.01, public comment. I do not have anybody signed up for public comment. Is that correct? Moving on to 3.01, District Comprehensive Plan and Updates. And I'm going to give that to Dr. Hughes.
Thank you, Kat. Good evening. So tonight, Dr. Bryson's going to be working with me this evening. We want to wish Dr. Reppert well for not being able to be here this evening. But we wanted to start by looking at tonight's agenda. So tonight we're going to be looking at assessments in Southern York County School District. We're going to be looking at how we have grown our students over the last couple of years. We're looking at the District Comprehensive Plan Review. We will be looking at academic data from that comprehensive plan, and then finally moving into the proposed district comprehensive plan that will be brought forward on Thursday evening for you to approve, if so found. So today we are going to be looking at we'll talk a little bit about what assessments are we currently using to gather data about our students and the progress that they're making. So we'll start over on the right-hand side. We have state assessments that give us information that are put out by the Pennsylvania State Department. We look at English Language Arts in grades 3 through 8 for PSSAs, Pennsylvania School System of Assessments, mathematics for grades 3 through 8, and then science. You'll notice that we have a change coming up. This year we have 4th grade and 8th grade. Next year is a pilot benchmark year, so we will be having 4th, 5th, and 8th grade tested in PSSAs. And then you'll notice for the following 25-26 school year that we'll just be having grades 5 and grades 8. So they have changed our science PSSAs to be in 5th grade now instead of 4th, and they're collecting off the data to move forward toward that. Next year, as I said, will be a benchmark year. 4th grade will still have the test, and then they'll pilot without any penalty for our students, the 5th grade. From that, the DRC company that creates these tests, they will do some metrics behind it to make sure that everything is valid. Then we look at our keystone exams. We have algebra, we have literature, and we have biology. And tonight, as we go through all of these pieces, we will be really looking in and doing a little bit more of a deep dive into them. We also have on the left, these are local assessments, and they're nationally normed. Why is that important? Why do we use the local assessments? Our Acadians, English, language arts, and math, that's for our elementary students. It really gives us an idea where they are with reading and math basic skills. So we use this to get a really good baseline for our students to see how they're doing with decoding, how they're doing with fluency. And then we're also looking for those math skills and seeing how they do with addition, subtraction, number identification, those pieces. That test in itself is rather quick. We take a little bit of time, so you'll see the local assessments that we give, they are anywhere from 10 minutes to our biggest is really about 50 minutes. And they're usually our classroom diagnostic tools. We use classroom diagnostic tools for biology in our science and also 6th and 8th grade science. We use classroom diagnostic tools for ELA, for literature, and we use them also for mathematics and algebra. They do go down the third grade. We've primarily used them in our middle and high school, but I will tell you, our teachers have been asking for more data, and with these, they're the most closely aligned assessment to our PSSAs and Keystones. The same company makes the questions for both tests. So it goes through the same process for our classroom diagnostic tools as for the Keystone and the PSSAs. So that's one of the reasons why we're really looking at trying to use more of them in the future and making sure our teachers are well trained in what that data is giving us. We also then go down to iReady, which is an assessment. We've aligned it. We've looked at that in comparison to our PSSAs and found an alignment there. But it also tracks how well our program, our math program, is doing. So we have that as another assessment, and then Spring Math. And we'll be getting a little bit later into more about what we use each one of these for and kind of give you a deep dive into how we use the data here.
Dr. Hughes, one thing I would add for the sake of the board and anybody that's watching is those classroom diagnostic tools as well as the other local assessments, because they're fairly short compared to a year-end assessment, we do them multiple times a year so that we're able to measure not only the baseline, but are we growing, and if not, our teachers are meeting in teams, whether it be by grade level or by subject area, to talk about where are our kids at, what is it that we can do to improve areas of need, or where are we strong at versus waiting to a year-end assessment.
Thank you. So as we look, we talked about achievement scores. What we want to focus in tonight is on the PSSAs and the Keystones, and then we'll get into some of our local assessments, but we're going to start with the broad range, and we'll narrow down as we go through. So as we go forward, I want to take just a minute to talk really quickly about our comprehensive plan, because part of tonight is to really look at our past plan and then to identify where we're going with our new plan. One of the things, Kat, if you want to go to the next slide, thank you. One of the things that you'll see on the right-hand side, we've talked a lot in the past about what the comprehensive plan is. It's every 3 years, it's a guide and a way for us to kind of look at a plan and going forward and how we can make achievement. But I want to point out, on the right-hand side, you'll see that we set our direction. We assess, we use our assessments to see how we're doing and what we need to do, create our plan on. And then we look at implementing the plan, monitoring the plan. But I think it's really important because one of the things that the board has asked us to do fits very nicely and aligns with this. It's about monitoring and adjusting that plan as we go along. So we want this plan. In the past, it really hasn't been a living, breathing plan. We want this plan to truly be a living, breathing plan where we're coming back, we're looking at the data, we're making adjustments and moving forward, and really making this as a plan that helps us to stay focused on what we need to achieve. Okay, so our first plan goals, we had to establish a K-12 educational system that fosters career awareness and preparation through the development of social emotional competencies to improve interpersonal skills, including problem solving, critical thinking, civil discussion, collaboration, and setting goals. All of that to say, we have a Chapter 339 plan that requires us to look at our students and prepare them for careers after our high school and after college, wherever direction they decide to go. We use this and use the standards, the career awareness standards, as a benchmark really to identify how we're doing with making sure kids have those and our students have those skills that they need. You'll see our baseline was 100%. Our target goal is 100%, so we started at 100, we wanted to end at 100. What we identified is that we had a 99.5. So when you looked, there were a couple different reasons for that, but we finally have this year, because we're in March right now, Our final calculations don't come in until the end of the school year. So there's still some time for additional pieces that we're really attempting to hit that 100% this year.
Something to add here. So what we're required by the state to do is collect artifacts on those career readiness standards. It's not something, those skills are typically really easy to measure, their ability to collaborate, et cetera. However, the activities that we do, K through 12, qualify if we have a speaker come in and they're speaking on a particular career readiness. An activity might be completed, and then we document that those activities were completed by every student. The challenge with that is probably pretty obvious. If you miss one or two kids, or kids transfer in, transfer out, getting 100% is an extremely a big goal. But this, just to foreshadow a little bit, we did not include this in the upcoming comp plan for the next 3 years, mainly because we feel like we're doing well. It's strong. The processes are in place. It's not something we necessarily need to set a goal on.
And we also use we found a very good system through Smart Futures and our Naviance program that help us ensure that we have all of those pieces in place. So we have a designated warehouse that we keep all of that information in, but it also provides activities for us to help support and make sure that we're covering those career goals. So our comprehensive plan, the second goal that we had was to take, by June of 2024, to move the number of students scoring proficient or advanced on mathematics assessments increased by 30% over a 3-year time period. So I'm going to start by talking about how do we want to do that. So what does this look like? What does that mean? So what we were the way that I could explain it to you, if you took 10 people and they're all scoring at different areas, 30% of them would be 3 people. So by the end of that time period, we are looking to move, of those 10, 3 people forward into proficient or advanced. We're talking much larger numbers. So we have, when we look, our math goal, we had a baseline for our PSSAs of 33%. So we were looking at about a 20%, 20.1% increase of that number of students to move forward. We did not meet the goal. We were at 50%. For our keystones, our baseline was 70%, and you have these packets in front of you because some of the information's not on the screen, but just for your information, it should be broadcasted to, I think, our public, so that you should be able to see the full thing. But our achievement then, our target goal was to go from the baseline of 70%, and I apologize, it should say 79% as being our target goal. And we did not make that because our keystones came in at 48%. I wanted to talk a little bit about these 3 tests, though, so that you can kind of see where we were over time. You'll see that here in front of you is a mathematics achievement comparison. And we took it all the way back to 17-18 because what we wanted to do is show, even before the pandemic, we really had a focus on we wanted to move our math scores. We decided to put in place and went through a rigorous evaluation process for a new math program. We started that math program in 2019-20, which is the year that we have no assessment for. And then we had that dip. So as you can see, what I wanted you to be able to see across here is that we were kind of like us as a school district. We're the dark blue. We started in 17-18 at 50, 18-19 50, didn't have anything, put a new program in place. We, during that year, did not use Ready or iReady, and the following year did not use Ready or iReady. So we really started back using our new program 21-22, and we did retraining during that time period, and you'll see that we started making increases. So while we haven't met our benchmark goal, we are expecting to continue the processes that we're learning and putting them in place to make sure that we continue to see that climb. The next piece, we wanted you to be able to see by cohort. So let me explain this to you. The 25-26, that's the graduating year, they would have been in third grade during the 16-17 school year. So you can kind of track their progress of how they were at 59, went down to 48, went to 51, went out for COVID, went down to 24, and they were back at 40 now. So as you go through, and these are through 8th grade, because you'll see Keystones later, it's a different assessment. So as you go through, you can kind of see, once again, looking at those third grade bands, we dipped, but now we're starting to see the climb back. We're really looking to see, with this new program, with training, with all of the pieces that we're looking at, and I'll show you what we're doing, how we're going to try to continue to grow our math scores. Because what we are very strong and firmly believed, we weren't happy with our math scores before we went out with COVID. We are continuing to look and drive forward and really make those scores achieve higher. The next thing to let you know is about the Keystones. One of the things across the state right now, I've had conversations with many of my colleagues. A lot of us saw this drastic change from in this last year. Now, a couple of things that I need to make sure that everybody's aware of. Our Keystones in algebra is an end of course assessment. So that means if I am an 8th grader and I take an algebra course and I take the algebra assessment, as an 8th grader, my score gets reported. If I'm proficient on that or advanced, I don't take that test again. It just stays there. So what we're looking at, we identified that in our 11th grade scores last year that were reported, had a group of students that they called exempt. So during the COVID year and part of the hybrid year, they said, we're not going to count scores because we didn't have a test. We have, large parts of our students that aren't here. We're going to give everybody an exempt. So it doesn't really, they said it didn't hurt the district, but it didn't help the district. What we're finding is that a lot of our students that are taking algebra in 7th or 8th grade tend to be our students that have more math aptitude. So they score typically proficient or advanced. Those are our 7th and 8th grade students. So for this group of students last year, we had 64 students that are exempt from that group. Now, mind you, that's a 7th grade test. Then you also have students that are taking it in 8th grade. Then you've got other students that are taking it in 9th grade. So the band for the algebra test is much larger than what a literature or a biology would be. So what we identified is that 27.6% of our kids were exempt from that score last year. We're identifying right now, if these are our kids that are typically proficient, we would anticipate that our score would have been much higher there. There's a lot of different factors that go into this. We know we still have an algebra problem. We know that from before we went into COVID. We've never been at a level that we're really accepting of, especially for our students that need more hands-on, that need to have more of an algebra understanding, and need to have more application of that. So we're definitely looking right now at different ways to address the area of algebra, but we also realize that there is a 7th grade group that was in 7th grade that was going through the band that's also going to be in that reporting category for next year. So just to kind of make sure that the board's aware, 48%, we are absolutely at no means saying that that is anything that we would ever accept, but we also realize that it's across the state of Pennsylvania right now, that they're seeing it multiple places.
So another way to say that would be, if you were to take the 27.6% and say the majority of those kids are proficient, you could say you're going to be close to 76% proficiency if they took the test and they were included. Again, not to the 86% the year prior, but not 48%. And oh my gosh, what is going on? And I think Kim brings up another good point. The 7th grade group will impact next year's scores, so you're going to see something probably very similar in that Keystone scoring.
So with the Keystones being a graduation requirement, and of course there are other pathways if you have difficulty, but a student that does not pass their Keystone and has taken algebra, but then is required to take it again the next year when they have not had any algebra since the last time they didn't pass, what would be the pathway for that for success?
So if you're talking about this particular cohort of kids where it's coming up 48%, when they were exempt from the test, that means they have a passing score. So they wouldn't need to retake or do anything.
Yes, the ones that do not pass, because they're required to try again, correct?
So if you're not, yeah, if you don't score proficient in advanced, then what happens with our system is they could still get a passing grade. So they move on to geometry. However, the geometry programming that we utilize actually integrates a great deal of algebra, particularly in the first half. So what we do is we do the retake at mid-year that following year. And that's where you get into the 85, 83, 86%. So we have a philosophy, we're not going to just continue to test and test and test. We will test, or we will retest in geometry. We see that we get, goal area would be that mid-area, mid-80s area. But at that point, we're actually going through the data to handpick students that were extremely close to give them the option to do it during their Alg 2 year, potentially. So they could be going into as late as 11th grade, potentially, to have that opportunity. But long ago, we used to retake and retake and retake. And we had the data to support, why are we doing this to kids? So the other piece to it is, not only would they have a second chance, they potentially could get a third chance if they opt out. But one of the also systems that are in place is they can get a composite. So if they took their 2 highest scores that were passing, if those scores are high enough, they don't need the algebra score per se. So I'm really strong in ELA, that's going to benefit me with that composite score. When it first started, that didn't exist until we really administratively, I'm not just saying Southern, across the state said, why are we punishing the student that struggles with algebra in this scenario of you need it to graduate if that's not their strength? Not to say we're not going to teach it and continue to improve, but having a composite score would be beneficial for those students.
Thank you.
Yep.
One of the other things to note also is that our students in middle school that are taking algebra, they are also required to take the 8th grade or 7th grade PSSA math test. One of the things that we have reached out numerous times to the Pennsylvania Department of Education about is that they're 2 different courses. So we're trying to blend in some of the PSSA 8 course with the algebra to ensure that students have both of them. They're high-level students oftentimes, but they're 2 different curriculums. So that's another area that we continually have to go back and forth and try to really make sure that we're hitting all of those different standards for those students and integrate. So then moving into the science assessment. So we were looking for,
Not bad. Where am I going?
back one.
Is that it?
Back one. So for our science assessment, we were looking for the 30% to go from a baseline of 66% to 76.2. We were at 71%. And then for Keystone, we were looking at 83% with a goal of 88.1, and we were actually at a 61%. As we go through, if you look at the next sheet, you will see for our PSSAs, there we go. We were looking at 66%. I want to also note in here that you'll see the orange and the gray band. The orange band is York County and the gray band is Pennsylvania. So you can kind of see where all of the state of Pennsylvania and where specifically school districts that are in York County, kind of where we fell with them as well. And you'll be able to see that across for all three of the areas. One of the things that, once again, when we were looking back in 17-18, we were at a 70% and then a 78. In the last 2 years, we went up and then we kind of dipped a little. So once again, new STEEL standards. So we, as last night you were able to see, we have brand new programming, brand new curriculum that's really more aligned to the new STEEL standards. We did a lot of investigation and a lot of work at making sure that the standards were integrated with everything in the program, and then adding additional pieces where we needed to, where it wasn't strong enough. So for example, environmental literacy. Some of the technology standards, we didn't feel that the programs that we had quite enough, so we added more to them. So we're really going through and making sure we have assessments in place to help us continue to ensure that we are meeting those standards. CDTs are one of them that really give us a really good understanding of where kids are and the students as they go through those programs.
One thing I would add here in the area of science, I think a couple of things during COVID, our focus really, teachers really wanted us to sit down and talk about what's the priority given we're only in a hybrid schedule. Priority was ELA. We have to be able to read and write first. Math became the second, science became a third. That being said, I think we've recovered, or we're well on the road to recovery, but that being said, now we're switching STEEL our standards are changing. So we have decided to begin the process of change, even though the assessment's going to continue to measure the old standards until next year. But I think most of our staff are very supportive of, we know what the standards are, let's move. And I think that squashes some of the fear that we're just teaching the test. Now, we're teaching to the standards, and in this case, we're going to teach to the STEEL standards. We're not completely throwing away everything because some of the STEEL standards are very similar to the old standards. But I think that goes to we're not just looking for a score at the end of the year, and we want to begin that process and make sure folks are comfortable. And if the score drops a little bit in science, we'll take that today so that a year, 2, 3 years, we're in a much better place.
Real quick question on that. The STEEL standards, when do they actually go into place?
25, 26 are when the new tests will count. Next year, they will be 24, 25 will be the 4, 5, and the 8th grade. And then biology will be in there for all of them.
So Joe, if I understand, when do we actually implement the standards as far as the instruction,
yeah.
rather than the assessment piece?
Yes, yeah, I mean, more the
Yes.
education component than the
Yes.
assessment.
So you can do it as soon as you want to do, as a district, you can do it as soon, you're not prevented from beginning the process. However, districts may have held off because the assessment this year is still the old standards. We've begun to implement because we feel like that's a better move for the future for 2 years, 3 years down the road. So we've begun, we're not completely there yet.
Right.
And honestly, when you talk about switching the standards and implementing it in the classroom, that's not a 1-year process. That's a 2 or 3 year process.
Yeah, I'm just sort of like, is there a deadline to implement that?
Yes.
Next
so
year, absolutely.
Next year.
Next year, we will be fully having curriculum fully in place for elementary and middle. We're in the process right now of doing a scale for the high school, starting with like honors biology, and then continuing to move those. So we have a little bit more time with the biology. They haven't had massive changes compared to But we have been working on that. We started last summer with curriculum writing, and for the last 2 years, we've been doing the training, and we've brought in outside trainers. Liz Miro is one that the board has agreed to have come in again. One of the things that we found with Liz Miro coming in and doing our training, our teachers went to a training that was at our IU and came back and said, this is a person who really knows their stuff. They really understand. I got something from this. So we've been having her work with our teachers, and moving forward, we did high school, middle school, and it incorporated 6th grade because of the 6th through 8th grade band. This spring, we will be doing our elementary, starting with her, and then programmatic programs training with our elementary, and our middle school has been going through training, thanks to the board for providing those opportunities. So we should be having full curriculum implementation, elementary K through 8, and then getting into high school next year. As you can kind of see, cohorts are a little bit harder to do with the science just because of the span of time between when they take the test. It's in 4th grade right now and 8th grade. So it's a 4-year gap between when they would take those 2 assessments and then go into biology. But then as we get into the keystones, so you will see there was a drop. We came back in that hybrid year, kind of where we were, and then started to see that decrease. Once again, our biology and our literature scores did have some impact because they were also affected by exemptions, and really it took a hit on both of these. But as we said, there has been brand new training that has been going on with the new STEEL standards, so we're really looking at really that hands-on approach with the anchoring phenomena, really helping us to move our students forward and understand the full concepts of the science approach. Rather than just learning about different pieces, it becomes a whole package. And then finally, we had our language arts area. So our baseline for PSSAs was 59%. We were at a goal of 71.3, and our actual achievement was 63%. And then our Keystone goal was 74 to an 81.8. We were at a 79. So we were closer in our literature Keystones. One of the things that we have identified is that, especially with our PSSAs, during COVID, we did as much as we possibly could, but there was some problematic things that happened with having reading skills taught to elementary students on a computer program, or the pieces that were going on. You'll see that we've done a lot, though, to try to overcome some of those gaps as we get in to really looking at deeper dives.
Should that be ELA goal and?
Yes.
I think that-
We didn't switch.
Copy.
Yeah, sorry.
Copy
Thank you.
paste
It is
there.
ELA.
Yeah, I think that happened with science as well, with the Keystone.
Thank you. Okay. So our next, looking at the achievement, you'll see that we have made some increases. Looking at 2021, we're not back to where we were pre-pandemic. And once again, we started back pre-pandemic looking at ELA programs. This was the first year that we implemented a new ELA program, 3 through 8. We've also done a lot of training in the last 3 years for our teachers in the science of reading and really addressing the issues for our K through 2 students. As you look at cohorts, you can once again see, as you look through, specifically if you pay attention to the 2021, 21, 22, we have cohorts that are kind of started up, went down a little bit, but we're right around the same areas. So we're continuing to build that forward. And then our literature keystones. We were at 88% pre-pandemic. We are at 74, 81, and 79. So we see that little curve there, but once again, we're working toward bringing that forward. Okay, so that is,
Yeah,
question?
sorry. I was waiting for,
Yep.
waiting for a good break because I wanted to make sure I had all the information before I asked my questions. Quick question, on the, let me find it here. Oh, so you talked about the diagnostics, the frequent diagnostics. I just want to make sure I understand how those fit in. Are those the common formative assessments that HRS refers to? Is that, no, that's not the same thing?
So the assessments that are given in the locally normed, or our local
Yeah.
assessments, are really a lot of diagnostic and benchmark.
Okay,
Really, when you get into the formative and summative, some of those are more toward the standard itself or the eligible content that goes with that standard. So it's really looking to see in the instruction that's going on, where the kids start at, where they end at. When we look at the local assessments, we're looking at big overarching, like where are they skill levels? So really, when you look at formative, summative assessments, they really go more toward your instruction in the classroom.
Teacher generated.
okay. So we're not talking we're not talking about those anywhere in here.
Not right yet.
And the
You would-
diagnostics are those generally comprehensive in that when you take a diagnostic, it's the whole subject for the entire course they're taking at that time, or is it only to date?
So when they take a diagnostic, what they're doing is they're saying a student at this grade level, they start with a question. That student, if they do well on it, they go up to the next question. If they do well on that, they go up to the
Oh,
next question.
it's adaptive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
It'll tier it based upon the responses.
Yep.
Is it computer-based? Is that how?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
The benchmark is an assessment then that tells you where the grade level, where they should be. And it's like from here, and then we do it again to see how much have they moved. So we're able to use those in a couple different ways. And then what we look at is, so when we talked about Acadians, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, we look at that Acadians to get like, okay, they're having problems in these skill areas. We need to do some intervention to get them to where they need to be. But then we also look to say, on grade level information that they have, this is where they're scoring. So with all of these, we're still taking them through the curriculum, but we're also adding pieces to that. We're giving them more support, we're teaching them more skills, and we're seeing that they climb then.
So as a classroom teacher, I may not need to teach a whole lesson over again. I'm going to teach the next, but think about it as, but I've got a group of 5 kids that are still struggling with phonics, like, let's say in 3rd grade. I can pull that group together and I can highlight phonics in the area of that lesson when I do a small group. So everybody doesn't get necessarily the exact same thing. I can tailor it to some of the skills I've identified in that group. If I didn't have the data, I don't necessarily know exactly what intervention to utilize when I do that small group. And that's the concept that you're continuing on, but you're also doing, you're doing some remediation in areas that they may be in need of. And it works similar in the area of math as well.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the common formative assessments, but we can do that offline since that's not part of the presentation. You mentioned with the algebra keystones that 27.6% of the kids were exempt last year based on having passing scores in the course. Is that, or the I don't know if it was last year, but it was the
Over the
COVID year. Okay. You mentioned that specifically about the algebra keystone. Does that apply to the other keystones as well? Was there any exemption on those, or was that only?
There was.
There was. So,
Yes.
so we should take that into account on all of the keystone results. Is that
Yes.
there's an exemption around the same time?
Yep.
Okay.
The difference being your cohorts of ELA and bio are gone.
Right. Okay.
They've graduated.
Okay. I see. So that only
Yeah.
it could apply in theory to all of them, but it only applies in fact to algebra because of the
Yep.
because of the band of the cohort.
Yep.
I gotcha. Okay. I think that's all I have for the moment.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so as we get into the new comprehensive plan, I'm going to take you through, and I chose fifth grade because I can really show you the different assessments and things. I took a fifth grade class, and we're going to do a deep dive so that I can kind of talk you through why we look at the data that we do and how we go about doing that. So our first goal in the comprehensive plan is to really make sure that we have effective teaching in every classroom. So we know you can have the absolute best curriculum out there, you can have great assessments, but if the teacher in the classroom doesn't have the skills that they need, it's not going to take our kids anywhere.
I think this is important to highlight. If this curriculum's better than this one, which one are we taking? This one that's better, if our teachers determine it to be the case, right? But we've learned over the years, we can put the best curriculum in place. People matter more than programs. Like the implementation of that curriculum and what we do for the kids in the classroom truly makes the biggest impact on the product. And so we can look at, and I would never do this necessarily in this setting, but we can look at some of the strongest teachers were strong with this curriculum, and they're still strong with the new curriculum. But it may help the teacher that's brand new in the classroom or only been there a year or two. It may help accelerate their growth in this profession to be experts, to be master teachers. And I think that's critical. It's the reason why it's level 2 in Marzano's HRS. There's a reason level 1's level 1. You need a safe, supportive school first. You need to have the processes in place to continue to monitor that. But the second piece is now, how do we help teachers grow? Teachers that are growing help grow students. And that we've seen it time and time again. And so that's the real focus. You could have picked fourth grade, you could have picked third grade. At the end of the day, we want the teachers in fifth grade being as proficient at analyzing the data as I might be at analyzing the data, or Kim might be, because they've got to go in the classroom tomorrow and utilize that. We're not going to be there with them. And so part of HRS's goal, and a huge part of that, is how do we get Kim and Bob and Nathan working together to look at data in fifth grade in our classrooms that are right across the hallway. So we, in essence, create our own support system, and we're able to talk about Kim's kids who performed way better on phonics than mine. How can that be? We utilize the same curriculum because the instruction looked different, or students have greater needs potentially in that area in Kim's room. And then we can work together to say, what did you do differently, or what looked different that I might be able to go back and attempt? But if we're uncomfortable looking at the data, we have no way of making comparisons between our local group of kids, which demographically should not be much different overall. And that what we call professional learning community is the three of us working as a team versus closing our doors and working in isolation. So when Bob thinks about Marzano and his HRS, and I harp on this with everybody, it's about monitoring how we're doing on a day-to-day basis, and more importantly, engaging the people that are in the classroom, our teachers, in the data analysis. Not having somebody up here saying, your score's low here, what are you doing about it? We don't need to necessarily do that. We do grade level comparisons. We do district level comparisons. And that's where you usually see, do we need a curriculum change? Because it doesn't look good across the board, or it looks awesome across the board. But where we see differences is where they have to be empowered to engage with that data, and empowered then to make day-to-day changes as time goes on without Kim standing over that group. At first, I'm going to be honest, they need our support to show them you can do this, this is very doable, and in fact, 6 months from now, you're going to be like, this was a ton of work, but I'm rejuvenated in seeing the growth the kids are making, and that is something different. That's different, but I'll finish with this. I went rogue, I'm sorry. That's what happens when you throw me up here. But that is what we're hearing on the street, so to speak, is the teacher saying, I have asked every single group I've been in, what are you most proud of? Without a doubt, one of the 3, 4, 5, 6 teachers that are sitting with me say, I'm most proud of the growth the kids are making, and it's because of the work we're doing together, not in isolation. And we're doing more now. When you guys hear this, you should be like, how in the world are you changing science standards? And you're implementing iReady math, but you also know there's professional development that needs to happen there. And we just switched the ELA curriculum, right? Like, that's a ton on especially an elementary teacher that has to do all that. And I'm not hearing I'm overwhelmed. I'm hearing it's a lot of work, but we're having a good time because we're seeing it. That's something different. And you should be proud of that. And I attribute it in part to HRS. I attribute it to our staff mostly. But they are buying into this concept that you're not alone. This whole concept is we're in this together. And when we're measuring, you guys are measuring. We're not measuring you. You're measuring the kids. And you're making modifications in the right environment. And so that's, I think, what and I know Joe and Samantha were a part of the comp plan. We talked a little bit about HRS. We talked more about, we were leaning towards how do we set the measurable goals like we've always done, what the percent of growth is going to be, et cetera. And the teachers went towards, wait, this ties into HRS. This is the language we've started to speak. Why can't we take the comp plan and make the goals around implementation of HRS, because we're seeing positive results from that. We're seeing the results of being able to speak the same language to one another and know what we're talking about. And so that really is how the comp plan shifted to a more, we want full implementation, and so each of the goal areas, who, by the way, were sitting on opposite ends of the room, came back and wrote it really in an HRS form. So it's kind of like, hey, us, but.
One of the things that's really awesome to hear about this also is that we've had we've really been studying the effective teaching in every classroom. We've started that this year, and I've had teachers come and say, Kim, it's easy stuff that I just get so caught up in all the other things that are going on that I forget some of the basics of, I have to establish this. When I'm doing groups, I need to do this. And having each other talking about that, they're sharing this with one another in their team meetings. And that's where the growth is really, they're reminding each other of good, effective instructional practices. And then we're looking at different ones throughout the year. We started the year really looking at how to create a classroom environment, establishing rules and procedures. That's all a part of setting up a classroom. That's all a part of effective teaching. And then getting into and it keeps building and going on, and then you start getting into, and you'll see when we get to goal number 3, it really focuses in on data then. So effective teaching in every classroom is our goal number 1. We have safe, collaborative, supportive. Once again, because if you don't have a safe environment, that is the foundation for everything out there. Then we have goal number 3. This is that viable curriculum. But during this viable curriculum, it's making sure that it's high quality, that we're talking about it. We're looking at increased achievement. So that's where the data pieces come in. You cannot do level 3 without having a focus on academic achievement that's happening with our students. And then we also have a goal in here, once again, looking at resource distribution, because we want to make sure that everything that we are purchasing, everything that we are moving toward, it all goes back to student achievement. So as we look at this, there are 4 goals, 4 leading indicators in level 3 that are all about assessments. So I wanted to make sure that we started with this as we do the deep dive, because while we may not say it's a 10% or it's a 30%, everything goes back to you should be making adjustments throughout the year to make sure that you're getting the maximum amount of achievement that you can get. So we look at these 4 leading indicators for level 3 will help drive. What I'm going to be showing you is that why did we feel that we needed HRS? Because we have this going on in our school district in pockets. So one school may be doing this aspect phenomenally, but another school might be just beginning. So what we need to do, and we're looking at HRS as the means to help get us there, is making sure that we've got systems and practices in place, that every school, every teacher, every administrator is working through these. As Bob said, the teacher in the classroom should know the data about their students and be able to have that conversation with whoever walks in the room. We're not there yet, but that's our direction that we are headed. We are farther along in some grade levels, we're further along in some buildings. But that is ultimately level 3 at a high fidelity of implementation means that we will have that in place. So as we go through, I'm going to do a deep dive now for you. So I'm starting out with the binoculars.
Just before we get into the deep dive, I just wanted to ask, and this is kind of a forward-looking question. You don't have to answer it now. You may answer it as you go, but I just want it to be in your head as you go. You kind of focused on, I think of learning as having kind of 3 pillars, and you focused on 2 of them, which were curriculum, the material you're teaching, the presentation of the material. I think of the 3rd pillar as study skills. And so to the extent that this addresses that pillar, which was kind of unstated at this point.
Yes.
If you can
Yes,
kind of
we will
mention
get
that as you go through, that'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yep. So we're starting out with the binoculars, and I did this specifically because when you use a pair of binoculars, you're looking a long distance away to bring something close up. So as we look, you'll see, and I've put in here, we look as a district. We look as an administrative staff. So when Bob, Len, myself, and our administrators get together, we look at the big information. We look at a math data, we look at our future ready, and we use a system called Linkit. We upload all of our data into the Linkit, and it allows us to kind of go through and pick. I want to see for my 7th grade students that took the PSS or the Keystone. I want to see exactly how they did. Now I want to drill it down to each student. So it allows us to do that and pick and choose. They also put out what they call a navigator report, where a lot of the pieces from today's presentation came from. They look at our information with publicly accessible information about Pennsylvania, the York area, but they have a data warehouse that allows us to kind of manipulate it and give it to us so that we can see multiple lenses. So we start with that big overarching. As you can see in your handout, you will see in there, I did a close-up, that one. I did a close-up to kind of say, this is 5th grade skills. If you look all the way over to the right, the 55, 51, 32, 42, 56, that's 17, 18, 19, 20, you'll see that you have actually one of the handouts for that in your packet. So you can kind of go through by grade level and see exactly how our students did over a time period. But we're looking at math achievement, I'm looking at 5th grade students, and this is the information that I'm pulling. This gives us, as Bob was saying earlier, we're looking to see all of the buildings, where are we? Was there one teacher that was higher than another? Was there a couple, schools that were high and one that wasn't? And then we're trying to drill down. Sometimes we find out, hey, this student or this school had a long-term sub in this class and the scores were a little lower. So we're really trying to drill down and kind of piece apart and find out what's going on. This oftentimes happens over the summer. As soon as the data comes out, we get together. You should see us all whenever the data gets, we're like all sitting by our phones waiting and then texting one another as soon as it comes out. And then we get together and we start really looking at the data, going through it, working together. We as administrative teams, we get together with Len and myself and Bob, we get together with Friendship. We'll get together with Shrewsbury, and we really go through, we have them analyze their data, kind of go through that way. Len and I are having discussions to talk about how is this looking toward a program that we're using. We're adopting this new program. Let's see how it's doing so far. So then we take the next step and, hold on, I'm going to back it up for a minute. So in your binder, you have a paper that looks like this. So I want to talk about this one first. So this in itself, we as districts in York County, we get together and we all compare scores. So you can see where Southern was compared to other districts in our area. This is for 5th grade mathematics. Once again, I'm showing you kind of what we do, the look. I'm looking to see, are there other districts that are way ahead of us? We don't look just in York County, we look across the state. We're looking to see, hey, is there a district that has been traditionally had really high scores that we can converse with? We've had partnerships that we've made where we've gone and visited them. We went to Pittsburgh to talk to a school district that had some information about math that we were really looking at. So we look at multiple lenses, not just one piece. We're pulling information from multiple areas. I've included in here a PSSA score so that you can kind of see from 5th grade 20, 21, 22, and 22, 23, so that you can see across the district where were we in each of our buildings. So I look to see, okay, and our principals look to say, well, we made an increase across 5th grade in all 3 buildings. But wait a minute, I'm looking down here. Southern went from 49% to 64%. We need to figure out what happened there. How did that happen? Like, why did they get that increase? But then I look and say, well, wait a minute, Friendship went from 32 to 57. So we're starting to pull out the numbers to see they may not be at 64%, but they've had growth. What are they doing? So then once again, we start having these discussions, but it's not just us now. Now teachers are starting to have discussions.
The other thing that becomes, in my mind, obvious too is you can look at 5th grade this year, 5th grade last year, what's the cohort? What's 4th grade last year, 5th grade this year? Same group of kids, apples to apples. What kind of growth did they make through their cohort, which is valuable information, sometimes more valuable than just simple proficiencies.
So once we get done and we feel that we have exhausted the state data, we're ready to go to the next lens. So this time I chose a camera because, once again, I'm looking at something, I want to pull it in closer. I want to kind of bring it more to me, and there's another layer that we're looking at. So we look at, for this, we talked about those Acadience test scores. And we talked about what is Acadience, what does it give us? So for a 5th grade student, and you need to understand that 5th grade, 4th grade, 2nd grade, they all have different things that they're looking for. Primary has different skills than what a 5th grade student would have. So for 5th grade in Acadience, we're looking for a full composite score, and then we're looking for computation and concepts and applications. We're identifying students in that area. They take a fall benchmark, So you'll see we had 67 students that were above benchmark, 39 students that were at benchmark, 45 below, and 62 well below. What we're looking for is we're pulling out from there what areas we got to figure out now what skills and things that they're deficit in. When you look at winter, you'll see in your packets that our students in winter, we had 112 students at a 52% that are now above benchmark. So we want to continually see the movement going from left to right. We want to see those student groups moving. When you turn the page and you go to the next one, that gave us the composite. So we have an understanding of where they are. Now this next one really kind of takes it down into, this is where students scored on computation. So we start looking, most of our students were well below benchmark. We had 77 students, and then we went up through 48 students in the fall. But then we look down at our winter, and we're seeing we took that 77, now we have 47 students that we need to make sure we move. And then we continue the move, and we went from 48 students being above benchmark to now we have 93. So we're looking to see, are they making a movement? That's computation. Here's concepts and applications. So you can kind of see, once again, different skill that it's looking at. But it's going from 43 students that were well below to 31. And we're seeing, though, that our above benchmark went from 66 to 123. So you'll be able to see kind of how that keeps moving. Now, this is where it gets to the point where we're able to start drilling it down by student. I had to take and do some manipulation here because I wanted to take out for confidentiality reasons, but I wanted to give you 3 students. So we have 3 students that are listed up here, and they go across. The first student has a composite score of 107, a computation score of 49, concepts and applications of 58. The second student has a composite score of 241, computation 124, and concepts and applications 117. Then our student down at the bottom, this is the student that we need to figure out what's going on there, and you can see by colors. They're at a 50 for their overall, 18, and a 32.
So thinking about grouping students in small groups in your classroom, you can identify the kids that are weak in a certain skill and group them together to do that a little differently for that group based upon their need for computational.
And what that does, when we go back to strategies in the classroom, Marzano level 2, it's all kinds of strategies on how to do that. How do you create those small groups? What kind of instruction? How do you do direct instruction? How do you do, so they're giving different strategies to help teachers to be able to run those groups and do those things. So this is a graph that you'll see. So for each one of these students, you'll see the beginning dot, which is the first grid is the one that is the composite. And then you'll see that little white dot with the black dot inside of it. That's where you want the kid to be by the end of the year. So we're looking to see who's making the growth, who's already above the growth before they even started. But we have this on every single one of our students. So we're able to really look and say, okay, we've got this student, are they making the progress? And what we find sometimes is, no, they're not. So what are we going to do? And I think that's the piece that we've been working at an elementary level for quite a while on some of these different skills. Once again, every school is at a different place with this. We found with ELA and language arts, we were giving tests, and then it was kind of like, well, what do we do now? So we started learning a lot more about the science of reading and about decoding. And so now we have pieces in place where we have interventions and activities that help us show that growth pretty quickly. And we track that, and then it comes through on the Acadience exam as well. So we're looking at multiple lenses, we're looking at multiple data points to make sure that we're seeing the growth, that it's not just one thing saying, yes, it's growing. No, we're looking at multiple data points.
I have a question, please, if I could, before we moving to the next role, I'm seeing a lot of differential between the examples we have here. And I know that you're specifically targeting those students that need the help and gathering them together. But how is teaching staff supported through those different learning levels and pulling those kids out? How are we doing in that regard? Is there enough staffing in the classroom to come alongside with the teacher, or does that have, an effect with the paraprofessionals coming in and taking those kids out? What does that look like on a daily basis? Do we have enough support for the teachers to be successful in this initiative?
So
So I'd say the answer to that depends. We'd always need more. But I think we're doing well in the sense that we don't have huge class size. We've got above average, and we're very above average in that area. I think what's happened, which has helped us, is we've taken, let's say, a reading specialist and an instructional coach. One is focused on how do we support teachers with reading instruction, and how do we support teachers with math instruction. They have a focus, and they're in supporting the teachers. Now, there's a difference, because I think I heard you say, who's pulling all these kids? The concept is they stay, we regroup them in a different way, and we may have support coming in. And the other thing that's happening is Kim next door in her 5th grade is working through the same challenges. So we may be developing strategies, and Nathan's also part of our team, where I begin to do some supports for my kids that need computational help, and then I share it with both, because you're doing some of the same work in your classroom. So you're not creating 5 different lessons necessarily. You may be creating one, but now we're much more efficient in how we share and talk about that, so I can support those kids right here in my classroom. And at times during the day, they're also sharing kids. So now my computational kids are going with Nathan because he's an expert compared to me, but I'm taking potentially some of his ELA kids in a small group. So I can now divide kids that way. I think what we've also gotten to is a point where we're also focused on now 4th grade. I might take all the math kids, that's my strength. Kim's taking ELA kids, that's her strength. And now I'm focused more on 1 or 2 subjects than all 5 or 6. Not a good strategy, kindergarten, 1st grade, because that's a lot of transition for that age group. But as they work their way up through elementary, we now begin to specify, I don't want to say like a middle school, but they're moving towards that, where now I'm focused on. So that's made it easier on staff becoming experts and not overloaded with all the new curriculum, et cetera. We would never have enough staff, and I'm not saying this is what you're suggesting. Lower ratio is great, but at some level, you're not getting the bang for your buck either, meaning until you get to the point where you're one-on-one. Now you have this excellent model, but that's a different model of schooling altogether. But what we do know is the research is pretty heavy on do everything you can in the classroom, make your teachers better. I have the concept that I'd rather have every teacher be a reading specialist versus every kid that needs reading instruction go to the one reading specialist. So if they can share that wealth, which is our system we have in place now, we're in a much better place where those kids can stay and get the supports they need because the teachers are better equipped to do that. So I probably said 3 or 4 different concepts there, but.
And I think the other thing, and you hit on it, Mary Lee, is that we have phenomenal instructional assistants in our classroom. And I say, like, they're our paraprofessionals, but they truly are instructional assistants. Mm-hmm. They come in and they pull kids and we train them, giving them the same training that the teachers get because we feel the importance is so. Now, not every building is there yet. It's an ongoing process to develop this. But we have paraprofessionals that are providing extremely intense interventions with students and have the capacity to be able to help that child truly grow and have made connections with these kids. There are some of our students that, like, that is the highlight of their day, and it's an intervention. But they've made connections with the paraprofessionals that are in our building, and I cannot say enough. We have phenomenal teachers that are willing to go above and beyond, and we have paraprofessionals that are absolutely willing to help, and really they want what's best for kids.
So just one follow-up question. So the coaching staff for the teachers, do they come in and provide physical assistance, like when there is a need in the classroom, or do
Yes.
they just coach
Yep.
the teacher through how to
So it's both.
divide themselves?
The best way to
Different.
coach is to model.
Yep.
So they're in there in support, meaning they're going to they may be there for a week just working on one concept or area with that grade level. So that-
There's
Yeah,
one in each elementary,
elementary.
so there's 3.
Yes. So we have, at Friendship, we have 2 reading specialists and a coach. And then we have an instructional specialist at Southern and Shrewsbury, and then a coach at Southern and Shrewsbury. One of the things that we also identified is that, and with me being able to be in the buildings, I'm there a lot of times in the evening. I see our reading specialists and our coaches, they're working with teachers sometimes until 6 o'clock at night, and they're looking at data, and they're making plans for the next day on what that teacher can do and how they can go in and support. And I've seen them in their classrooms, they're modeling. Sometimes it's co-teaching, sometimes it's modeling, so they use a variety of methods. And then they're also a part of helping to direct team meetings. And the next thing that I'm going to show you actually came from one of our instructional coaches. So once again, I said before that we're really on that level of looking at the lenses. I don't know if you're like me, but I sometimes need my phone to make things larger. So I look at the pathway in front of me, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what other data is out there? There is a report called PVAS, and we'll be getting into this. One of the things that we're looking at in the future is continuing to have some workshops and things on this. But one of our coaches at one of our elementaries started really training this year on PVAS. PVAS is a way to look, they take the scores of a student and they look at all the past scores and they project where that student should be. So for a 5th grade student, you want to look at their 4th grade PVAS projections. So she's working right now with teams of teachers to look at those projections, and then they're pulling and they're creating, this is one of the data sheets that they have. But they're pulling data, not just from PVAS, they're now comparing it to the rest of the data sets that they have. So they're making a big picture of what that student can do, but more importantly, what they can't do, so what do we need to try to help support and build. So as we go forward, that's just another piece that we're looking at. Once again, HRS helps us get level 3. Our goal is by 3 years that we have all of these systems in place and that everyone's trained on them.
All right, I'm going to save Sue here, and I'm going to say we've given you a whole lot, and there's a whole lot more data, but I don't think we necessarily need to go through all of it, but I think it gives you a flavor of all the different pieces of data and data sources that are being utilized across the district. And certainly, Dr. Hughes, Dr. Reppert, myself, will certainly, as always, make ourselves available for the questions that you might have after you take a look or are able to take a deeper dive into it, if that makes sense.
And Nathan, your question specifically goes to when we look at the READY program itself and we look at the instruction, we go through and look what type of skills are we teaching for all types of different things that they're doing, whether it's, test-taking skills, whether it's writing skills, whether it's, we actually go through and have monthly report outs that we look at what instruction's happening in the classroom. For 5th grade, they look at ELA, math, science. We're looking curriculum-wise, where they are, and then continuing to build on that.
So before we move on from the data, the data that you're collecting in the classroom, or the teachers collecting in the classroom, What level of accuracy does it have in predicting the outcomes of the PSSA test scores? I mean, is there a correlation between the data collected and then the scores that are coming out in the end?
Yes, the iReady, one of our instructional specialists, she went through and took every single student's child report, and there were definitely very strong correlations between the iReady and the PSSA. Same thing with CDTs with PSSA and Keystone.
So we're getting data that's accurate and giving us, it's almost like we know what the score is going to be before the tests are taken.
Not by individual child, because one moment at a time is not necessarily going to be
Sure.
predicted.
But overarching,
If you're looking for overtime, the best projection would be the one that Dr. Hughes just shared, PVAS, which is a growth projection. So allow me to go a little more in depth. They will take how a child scored, let's say from 3rd grade to 6th grade, and they will match that data up with a data set that matches that kid over the past 10 years across the state. So as those that are involved in data understand, the more data sets you have, the more accurate that projection becomes. They're pretty spot on as to what the projection is for that student now in 7th grade or 8th grade. Now, you can't go too far out or you stray off of that projection. But they're pretty good to project a year out, 2 years out. And they're actually using now what students, they'll give you a percentile of what the chance is you're able to go in an AP class and be successful. We've kind of smashed that a little bit. We've proven them wrong because our percentages are through the roof in comparison to what kids are projected to do in AP here at Southern, but they're using statewide data, which I think is interesting. But we use that simply to say, are we missing kids that potentially could take AP but think they can't? And not that we're going to pressure them in, but just to share that data with them. Sometimes they're like, yeah, I'll give it a shot. So the other thing is they'll do growth models where they'll say your math is in the blue, right? So we could have a proficiency in advanced level of maybe 40% total that are proficient in advanced, but our growth is dark blue, let's say. Meaning, although you're only at 40%, your kids are making greater than expected growth for how they have done in the past. Because we tend to just look at how many kids are proficient in advanced, right? But if they're so far basic or below basic, they may never be proficient or advanced. So the other important factor to look at is, but are they growing? And are they growing at a greater than predictable rate? So that was a long-winded answer, but there are some projections, but for any given kid, it may be true or not, based upon, the other thing is life happens. So child A has, mom and dad got divorced, and all of a sudden, and she showed one child was red, red, red. It doesn't mean they don't know how, it means what else is going on? So their discussions as classroom teachers are, well, of course it's red. They just moved in from, District A or B, outside of the state. They're way behind.
But you're saying they're predictive at a population level. Obviously, individuals.
Right.
Individuals are they only have one result to look at. You don't get to run 50 trials with an individual to see how often they're proficient. They either are or they aren't at that point. But at a population level, they are predictive.
And the other interesting thing is because the data is so detailed, so it could be algebra, you dive in and all of a sudden you realize the kid is way low in one area. Brings their score down potentially lower than their overall knowledge is pretty strong, but they're missing this piece. And so as a director of curriculum instruction, we need our staff to be able to identify that and then be able to address that on the fly. So predictability, that kid would predict to be low in the future. But when we dive into it and look at it, yeah, not so much. I think if we fix this, all of a sudden their projection's going to change.
I think there's also students that really, when they get to take some of these tests, really don't care. And we have that as well. Like, you have some students that spent 5 minutes on a test. That's not going to give you the score report. Like, we can sometimes even go through and say, okay, I know before it even comes out, this kid spent, 13 minutes on it. I know this kid because, and teachers go over, they try to be like, hey, come on, is it, we do the brain research of giving like peppermints. And, so there's all kinds of things, like kids will be able to tell you, hey, boost your energy, eat this before but when you have a student that's going through life, sometimes this is not a high priority for them.
And we have to be careful, because then you use that as an excuse,
Right.
right? So I say,
Right.
but the whole data set has kids all over the state doing that same thing. So it's important to look at the whole data set. More important for our teachers to be looking at classroom individuals within their class.
I mean, it feels like the classroom data could help the teacher at a much greater level than the statewide data. So how often is that data generated for them?
Yes, so when you get down into some of the like Spring Math and iReady, those are things that iReady gives us a diagnostic where we may do a benchmark, but then a student has a pathway that they go on. And they go through activities, they get pulled out for small groups, they go back into more activities, and that pathway continues to grow them. So that information is coming to the teacher weekly. Spring Math is in your packet. You'll see that is on kids report and the teacher reports on a weekly basis. In your packet itself, you'll see for a month all of the different skills students were working on, and then the teacher tracks them, but more importantly, the student tracks their process. And they make goals for where they want to go.
So two quick things, but they may be doing that 10 minutes a day, right?
Right.
Spring Math or.
Right.
So the actual, like if you talk about a CDT, the diagnostic test, so if I'm in biology, I might take it beginning of the year, so my teacher knows right away where I am in these skills. I might take it again in December, beginning of December, and again in April, or, enough time that modifications can still be made for the May Keystone exam. So your diagnostics, you would take 3 times, 50 minutes a pop. And the other piece is, more recently, we're sitting down with the kids and having discussion. What do you think? So that it's not me just saying to the kid, yeah, you're really struggling in this area, and it's more of a collaborative effort. What do you think we can do about that? How do we work towards that? These are the things to focus on as we move through the course to help.
Yeah, I want to step through some of what you just said, because that was actually one of the things I was going to take offline, but since Bill brought it up anyway. I had a suspicion that that math, you said weekly, and honestly, they're doing work daily that is going into that weekly assessment that then the teacher gets the data from, whereas biology, it's less frequent. And I do notice that math is one of the areas where we are improving more than other areas. And I can tell you that it's not only math that it's anything that requires memorization of a lot of information, like biology. The more frequently it's tested, the better you learn it. If you test small chunks. So I wonder if part of the reason that math is improving faster than other subject areas is that frequency of small testing over the material that's just been covered, because you learn differently when you're immediately tested on something than when you just read it or saw someone else do it. When you do it yourself or you have to recall it yourself, you learn it in a much more permanent way than if you just read it or heard it said.
And I think what's happening too, some of it's the repetitive assessing, to say test, because it seems like we're testing them to.
It's fine.
But the other piece is, but they're getting practice in math. They're able to get the practice specific to their particular skill need repetitively. And so it's not just they get the assessment, but then there's something to follow that, meaning we're notorious historically for, it's going to sound terrible, weighing the pig. You weigh it, and then, 3 months later, we weigh it again. But what did we do specific for that child in between, instruction-wise, to develop their understanding? So I think it's a combination, and don't forget, we're balancing that with the classroom teacher test or unit test. So that, if I heard you right before, Nathan, you said whether it be Marzano or any other program, they talk about common assessments. That's usually, we're in Unit 1, and the three of us are teaching Unit 1. Our end of chapter test or unit test is the same, so that we're able to compare our scores and talk about differences, right?
Yeah.
We're not known for that in education either. You have your own test. Those expectations could be up here. Bob's could be here. Kim's, you're a little above me. You thought I was going to go lower, but you're a little above me. And now, we all get an A, but did we all have the same level of understanding? Or we just have differences in our expectations of what kids can do? Well, now, if they're all going to assess in an end of unit, shouldn't they be the same? And shouldn't we all raise our bar up to Nathan's level? But that requires us to get together, talk, and work together a whole lot more than it used to.
And also, to your point, the CDTs, it used to be a test that you would give beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year. They've actually added a new feature to the CDTs, which, remember, 3 years our goal. It's actually by domain. So each one of the math domains has a part of the CDT that you can give. So it allows you to do pre-test, instruct, test. And then you go to the next standard domain area that you're working on. So it could be math concepts,
Could be computation, could be algebraic concepts, it could be numeric.
So it tests after each one of those pieces so that you're able to see the process, so that you're getting more informed. And the state came out with saying, okay, this test, it's so large, we need to give something for them to be able to do more and break it down more. And they came out with that, and it's a relatively new thing. Our teachers started doing that. Some of the ones that were dabbling at our elementary actually asked for that to start. We have certain teachers that were like, I want to get right into this. So they're starting to help lead the way. So we feel that teacher leadership and teacher empowerment, that's how we get everybody trained. It's getting small groups that become the people that are out front, and then they'll help us get everybody else trained.
The other thing you always hear is, if we're testing them so much, when are we teaching, right? You test. So there's a balance, and making sure your staff is, for us, a part of that discussion. And what do we need? What's benefiting?
Yeah, I mean, you probably won't hear that from me. I think a 10-minute quiz at the end of every class is one of the best instructional tools you can have, because it requires them to engage with the material that they just hopefully learned.
And so the other piece in there, you said summative assessment, you got the formative and the summative. So your other piece is, I loved the strategy of doing an exit ticket. You had to engage with what I wanted you to leave with. And if you didn't leave with it, I know right away something I have to address to start the class period, the next class period.
Yeah.
It's the same concept without a formal test or quiz. The other piece to having kids in groups and moving around to the groups, you learn so much more on where they're at because of the kind of independent questioning you can ask. Versus if I stand and deliver for the whole period, I don't know where everybody necessarily is, except for the 3 kids that had their hands up and I called on them 13 times. That's not telling me where all of them are. So that group scenario provides me that opportunity to get around. Plus, me personally, I think it's a much funner way to engage with kids and instruct. But
Once again, that goes back to level 2. Instructional strategies in the classroom. Whiteboards, quick, everybody show me what's your response, your answer to this. I have immediately, I know of my 23 kids, 17 got it, I need to pull these other to the side. then I'm moving on.
Part of our evaluation observation process is, how many of the kids know it? And how do you know that? So there's a kind of an evidence base, well, here's what I saw, and we get in a dialogue, but I saw this, let's talk about that, why I saw something different than what you perceived or saw. Not questioning to like grow, that more than it is questioning because you're right or wrong.
But I think that's why we went back to the HRS process, is that we need everybody to have this information. So there has to be systems and structures in place for us to make sure that we have all of these pieces so that every student, every teacher has the necessary components.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One
Thank you,
one
Dr.
quick
Keefe.
follow-up
Very
question.
No.
So, part of the comprehensive plan is we're setting the plan, we're going to monitor the plan. Do we have a picture of what that monitor, like, because,
Yes.
okay, 100% is a number, we can see what percentage we're at,
Yes.
but that doesn't really, I'm just trying to understand what that monitoring and reporting.
reality check.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
how does that play out?
So
And I don't even know if you have the answer to it right now.
I think we
Right.
need to have an idea, though.
We do,
Right? Like,
yeah.
I don't think, and when the staff and that team, Joe, was coming together with those goals, I'm thinking the same thing as a math person, okay? We've got to have something quantifiable. So for me, and I don't think it's probably clear as mud right now, but one component is us needing their HRS from a building level, so each building would have it. What is your data saying for level 1 and level 2? That's where we're at right now. So you got to maintain that. Where are we at? Where are areas that have dropped off from where we were last year to this year? And then beginning to monitor level 2, which has its own data set and evidence set, which I think we probably need to, when we move in our spring workshop, I think we take a look. We did some of this last year, but many weren't on the board at that point. Take a look at the kind of data HRS requires of us to maintain certification and what we're doing. But then from a student product piece, I think this data, our goal would be, you have a trend. So our trend should be going up. And if it's not, regardless of what we choose, and I'm thinking in our minds, it wouldn't be just PSSAs or just Keystones. How are we trending in your benchmarks you're using? How are we trending? Is there a grade level issue? Is it a elementary issue? Or is it a classroom issue? And those are the kind of things that are happening frequently. So for us, I think it's being able to capture that. If not at 10,000 feet, what's it look like at 5,000? It's overwhelming, the kind of data that's being utilized. But what would be meaningful to say, no, we're making pretty good growth? Because I know what we can say without a doubt is we're doing extremely well in the county, extremely well across the state, but it doesn't mean we stop growing. And I think the last 2 to 3 years, math, Nathan, as you indicate, it is trending, and math may be the toughest, but the staff will probably argue depending on what subject they are. But it can be done in all areas, and that's what we owe it to the community, is to continue to grow in that way. And I think getting feedback from you guys, I see what you're saying, but is it possible to show that in this way, or condense the data so it's a little easier to go through? I think we're going to have to work through that in the next year, and that would be helpful to get what's meaningful versus what might be meaningful for us, but not for.
Yeah.
And I also think one of the things that we're doing right now is coming up with common data captures so that we have the same data that we're all looking at on a normal basis. So that we're, so we have a lot of structures that we're putting in place so that we can make sure that we're, as we start setting targets, that we're able to show them and really kind of come back and show, And it's going to be some of them, we will, it may be sitting down with groups of people to say, we don't know why this is happening right now. So we got to figure that out. Let's, continue the dive into this. But I think that's the pieces that we have to have the structures to begin with so that we're able to continue to have those data analysis and really pull that data from multiple, viewpoints.
Yeah, I think the thing you can rest assured of, it's not, the administrative team as a whole, we're not sitting on top saying, well, here's the issue, or let's do this. The whole concept of HRS, you're engaging the people at the ground level. You may have ideas, you share them, they share ideas, and we work through, oh, I didn't think about that, or I'm missing that complete piece. For me, that's the big benefit, is you've got teams of people working all throughout this district, whether it be ELA, science, career readiness, whatever it may be. There's teams of folks working on it.
So how long have you been collecting the data in this format?
Define this, so.
Sounds like it's still under development in some
Yeah,
ways. Yeah.
This has been ongoing for it depends on,
Which one?
if it's spring math, that's fairly new. CDTs,
From 2017, right?
depending on grade level, I can remember implementing 15 years ago. Particularly the Keystones, because it's one of the only diagnostics out there, and it's free, so that's helpful as well.
I should be more specific.
Yeah.
You're in the classroom data.
Okay, so if we're talking about like HRS level 1, Marzano determines we're certified. We needed to submit the evidence. We needed to submit our data to them to analyze. Everything from video to handbooks, et cetera. That was just last year. And then our high school and middle school were further behind. They just submitted and got certified in level 1. And now this year we're beginning the process of level 2. Level 2's a whole different beast because you're talking about harder to measure instructional things, where we have to do observations and you're actually kind of checking, did you see it or did you not see it? And if you do 50 of those, we need to see it more than we're not seeing it. That's the kind of analysis you get with HRS data. I don't know, Kim, that's a snapshot, but.
I would say in the classroom data, to the level that we are now getting, it's been probably since COVID. We had common assessments and those types of things for the most part before, but within the last couple of years, we've had to deep dive and do lots of training to figure out because the gaps were so big. So I would say since COVID, the amount of data that we're pulling, and the other piece to this is that looking for resources that help us with that. So we've just adopted new, math was right before, but that was our focus then. Then we have a brand new ELA program, brand new science program that we are right now going through to say, okay, the common assessment, let's look at that. How's that going? Is this something that we need to change the common assessment because we're noticing that students, there isn't a question about this on it that we need. The new program that we're doing with the Edge of Planet 21 with our curriculum that we're putting in, I'll do a whole presentation on that, but it has opportunities for us to start putting in and evaluating assessments to standards. So we can actually pull and see, this is the number of times that we tested on this standard. We're not there yet. But that's eventually where we would like to head, is to make sure that we're able to pull multiple data levels to see how often are we hitting on different pieces.
And it sounds like our elementary schools are ahead of middle and high in that data collection?
there's more data collected, I'd say, at the elementaries for sure. And because we go in a whole lot of more directions as you go through the system, it's less standardized testing, if you will. I think it's why you see the state pick 3, really.
Do you find that that makes the data less conclusive then?
Not for those 3 subject areas. Like, can you judge the overall student?
But
I don't think you
yeah, but I think what you're getting at is to the extent that we're gathering more and more consistent data at the elementary level, we probably have more to act on at that level than we do middle and high school. So to the extent that we can improve, although like you said, it's more difficult because there's more variation in what is being taught.
Yeah.
Elementary is very consistent. It's the same subjects for every class, every student, more or less. But to the extent that we can, but like you said, it is going to be more difficult, but if we can, then hopefully we can get at least closer to similar improvement.
Yeah.
Data-driven improvements.
Yeah.
And our teachers are phenomenal they are open, like they want the information, they want to help kids. I've seen that more and more over the last 3 years, where they are the ones saying, we need, like before it was us taking things and being like, let me train you on this. Now it's more of the teachers, at least at the elementary level, that are coming and saying, I need more, like I have this area over here, what can I use and they're drilling down, they're seeing the benefits.
I think the other piece to it too is elementary years, you're really focused on a foundation, and so by the time they get to the high school, we want them to branch out and find their niche. This standardized testing is a little less important. And connecting the topics to, what's more important to me, let's say in biology, is that our kids can say, what kind of fields, if I have an interest in this, what's out there? What's available to me? And what else could I take in our high school to prepare me for that? I know that's kind of not the topic, but it is, because I think you quickly fall in the, again, testing. And our kids are killing AP. The number of kids that are taking it are killing it. The SATs, historically and now, have been outstanding. I know everybody doesn't take those. And it's becoming less and less a focal point of many college admissions. And so for me, you really want your high school kids to get to a place where they're able to go the pathways that they want, versus, we're judging them on it.
Also, that trend is turning. At least some schools are bringing back evaluation on SAT and ACT scores. So
some are always going to need something
quantitative.
take them, to take them to that next level. Yep.
Alrighty.
Thank you.
I do believe you presented both 3.01 and 3.02. So thank you so much, Dr. Hughes, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Alrighty. Meeting is adjourned.